Good day, class. So, our topic for today is language and history. Okay, so what do you mean by language and history? That is evident as language serves as a vessel for preserving historical narratives. Through written and oral traditions, people convey their experiences, traditions, and collective identity. The study of historical linguistics explored the evolution of languages, offering clues about migration patterns, cultural exchanges, and societal shift. In a sense, language and history are interconnected facets of human existence, each influencing and shaping the other. They provide the foundation for shared experiences, cultural identity, and ongoing evolution of societies. The history of language relied so much on the hands of the great linguists, from the time it started up to the 20th century. Language literally and constantly evolves with time and each development follows a timeline. In each stage, the language passes through our footprint of accomplishment of the great contributions of ancient philosophers to modern linguists. From the time language was first studied and structured, the transformations of language artifacts just keep coming. Changes applied to language miraculously suit the generations of its users. With the numerous language experts the world has, there are just a few noteworthy linguists whose contributions are widely adopted and scrutinized by modern linguists. So, throughout the 20th century, important linguists played a big role in shaping the history of language. Language has always been in changing and growing, and each stage it just to show the achievements of philosophers and linguists. From the early days of studying and organizing language, we keep making progress. The changes made the language seems to magically fit the needs of the people who use it. Even with a lot of language spread around the world, only a few really important contributions are widely accepted and studied by modern linguists. Let's proceed historical timeline of noteworthy linguists. Noteworthy linguists. Linguistics started to make a mark after Panene composed the Sanskrit grammar in India in 400 BC, followed by the remarkable linguists of Greece from the 5th century onward, namely Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. The lineage of the inquest that history records are all noteworthy. However, in the field of language and history, the following increase the law is well remembered. Linguistics became significant with Panini creating Sanskrit grammar in India, followed by notable Greek linguists like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Na-recognize ang history nga daghang importante ang linguist, but these few are particularly remembered in the field of language. Aristotle 384 and 322 BC. In 384 BCE, Aristotle was born in Macedonia, particularly in Stagira. His father served as the physician of the Macedonian king, Amenta, and stayed there until Plato's death. As the successor of Plato, he departed Athens and lived in Asia Minor, and then visited and Lesbos. Later, between 343 BC and 342 BC, Amenta's son Philip of Macedonia taught his 14 years old son Alexander. In 336 BC, that under died at the age of 32. Uncertain of Macedonian protections, I moved out of the Athens and lived in the Chalcis, north of Athens. Later in 322, Aristotle died of his digestive disease. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Macedonia. His dad was a doctor for a Macedonian king. After Plato's death, Aristotle took over his rule but later moved around living in Asia Minor and Lesbos. He also taught Alexander the Great. Aristotle left Athens due to uncertain protections from Macedonia and lived in Chalcis, north of Athens. Sadly, he died in 322 BC from a digestive disease at the age of 62. Contribution to linguistics. Aristotle's contribution to the development of language started with the deontology's language. He looked at it as an object of rational inquiry, a medium of communicating and expressing thoughts about anything under the sun. In Ogden and Richard, he explained the semiotic triangle, refers to a human means of expression of thoughts that are purposefully connected elements present in the world. In other words, he was establishing the relation between language, expression including sound word, with a mental meaning produced by this word. In other words, he was establishing the relation between language, expression, including within words, with a mental meaning produced by this word. In his Story of Truth, he provided the properties of thoughts and sentences are truth and falsity. He identifies the primary parts of the sentence, the noun and verb, which function as a subject and verb in a sentence. Aristotle made important contribution to language development by seeing it as a rational study and a way to communicate thoughts. Iyang gi-explain ang semiotic triangle na nakunik ra pod sa human expression, thoughts, and elements in the world. Simply put, iyang gipakita nga ang words nga ma-relate sa atong hunahuna. In his truth theory, he talked about thoughts and sentences being true or false. Aristotle also pointed out the key parts of the sentence, the noun and verb which act as the subject and action in the sentence. Robert Lode, 1710–1787, he was born in Winchester on November 27, 1710, and was educated at Winchester School at the New College, Oxford. In his lifetime, he worked as a professor of poetry at the University of Oxford. Lode was a layman after he served as Archdeacon of Winchester, rector of S. Wood High, Prebend of Durham, Bishop of St. David, Bishop of London, Dean of the Chapel Royal, and Privy Councillor. His naval acts ended after he died on November 3, 1787. Throughout his life, he had various important roles, such as being a professor of poetry at the University of Oxford. Lode was not only an academic, but also a clergyman. He served as different positions including Archdeacon of Winchester, Rector of East Wood High, Prebend of Durham, Bishop of St. David, Bishop of London, Dean of the Chapel Royal, and Privy Councillor. These roles showed his involvement in both education and the church. Unfortunately, Robert Lode passed away on November 3, 1787, bringing an end to his notable contributions and service. In 1762, he published his book titled Short Introduction to English Grammar, which became a standard textbook. The Short Introduction to English Grammar instantly gained fame over other grammar books that it was issued approximately 45 times from 1762 to 1800. Lode gained reputations as a prescriptivist, and the period gave rise to prescriptivism. The term prescriptivism refers to beliefs and practices where one's language is thought to be superior and correct and should be promoted. The explicit rules are laid down as the basis of the impositions on the language users. He was one of the few grammarians to publish writing about what is right and wrong in English grammar, where we use faultness that contained essential information that explained why a particular grammatical structure was right or wrong. Low's approach, known as prescriptivism, believed in setting rules for correct language use. He was one of the first to say what's right or wrong in English grammar, using footnotes to explain why certain structures were correct or not. His ideas influenced how people thought about and taught English grammar during that time. Ferdinand de Saussure, 1857 to 1913. In 1857, Ferdinand de Saussure was born in Geneva, Switzerland. He was interested in languages even at a very early age. At 15, he learned French, Greek, English, and Latin, and he also wrote essays on languages at the age. Having been influenced by a family of scientists, entered the University of Geneva and studied natural sciences. I stayed at the university, but he had to convince his parents to permit him to study linguistics in Leipzig in 1876 and luckily received his doctorate. Even as a young person, he was curious about languages. At just 15 years old, he learned French, Greek, English, and Latin, and wrote essays about languages. Despite his family's scientific background, he started studying natural sciences at the University of Geneva. However, he really wanted to study linguistics, so he had to persuade his parents to let him go to Leipzig in 1876. Luckily, he succeeded and earned his doctorate in linguistics. As a linguist, he was among the pillars of linguistics in the 20th century and is known as co-founder of semiotics and structuralism. Structuralism theories that things could not be understood without analyzing the context where they appear. Things might look self-evident at first glance, but structuralism goes beyond what one says and insists that context contributes to the meaning-making process. Ferdinand de Saussure was a key figure in 20th century linguistics. He played a role in creating semiotics and structuralism. Structuralism suggests that to truly understand something, you need to look at the context it in. Even if something seems obvious on its own, structuralism say have to consider the surroundings because context adds to how we make meaning in simple terms. And like saying you need to look at the bigger pictures to really understand things. In summary, structuralism advocated three similar concepts. A Saussure maintained the difference between lang, a set of conventions and rules, and parole, language as used in daily life. He claimed that the science was combinations of a signifier, the mental concept or idea, and a signifier, the physical existence including sounds and image. There was no intrinsic and particular reason why a sign was utilized to express a signifier. There was no resemblance and direct connections between language and the thing that is represented. That's why other languages call it using different name sounds. The meaning of science can be based on the relationship and differences from other signs. Saussure emphasized that there is no inherent real why a particular sign is used for a specific thing. Different languages use different names for things and there is no direct connection between the rule and the actual object. He argued that the meaning of words come from how they relate and differ from other words. So understanding a word involves looking at its connections and distinctions from other words. Lang in linguistic terms refers to the underlying structures or system of a language. Example of a lang will be grammatical rules, vocabulary, and syntax that collectively form the structure of a language. For instance, in English, the rule that nouns generally come before adjectives. Red car is an aspect of the lang, represent that structures norm that guide language use. Parul in linguistic terms refers to individual instances of language use. Example, a parul would be a specific conversations between two people where they exchange spoken word to convey their thoughts, feeling, or informations. It's tangible or real-world applications of language in a particular context.